Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for our second plenary session, the afternoon session, with a lot of discussions, also not only here on stage, but also discussions at your table. Because I'm very excited actually to present this new format to you. The format is called the table discussions, and it's really to engage more. So what is the concept? We will have two panel discussions today. Actually, we have four, but with two, we also would like to ask you to have a roundtable discussion at your table as well, just to exchange thoughts, ideas, how we can make the industry safer and honest. So the concept is we have 25 minutes panel discussion, then we have 25 minutes for you guys at your table to have your discussion. We also assigned a kind of a moderator. I don't know if all the moderators are also present. Who is a moderator at the table, an assigned one? You see? Well, if there's not an assigned one at your table, maybe you can assign one now yourself as we speak, because the role of the moderator is just to make sure that everyone, can say something, that everyone can talk. And there is also a form at your table where you can write on the most important remarks or outcomes from your discussion, or a kind of a little synopsis, because we really want to know what you are talking about. And if you really want to address something to the broader public, you can use this flag, because after those 25 minutes, I will just run around and collect some outcomes. So then raise the flag and I will come to your table. Okay, well, that's about the concept. Let me also introduce now our next moderator, because Tom Banks, you're the head of corporate affairs UK from Kindred Group, and you will moderate this panel discussion. Your panelists are already ready, and you will talk about realizing the ambition of a single customer view. Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for a really good morning, and we're hoping to continue it into this afternoon. Got a really good panel for you this afternoon on the concept of a single customer view. If that doesn't mean anything to some of you, I'll give you a brief explanation, because actually the UK has the most advanced concept of a single customer view and is about to go into a pilot of it in January next year. But I'll quickly introduce the panel. We've got Martin, who gave a great speech this morning, General Secretary of the EGBA. We've got Rasmus from MIndway AI, and we have Peter Paul from the Netherlands Online Gaming Association. They'll get their opportunity to have their say in a minute, but I thought it'd just be useful to give a very quick overview of the concept of single customer view and where we are in the UK in terms of the latest developments. So, in theory, the single customer view in its current format in terms of the debate would allow us the opportunity to look at customers as they pass through different operators and gives us the opportunity to identify if there's markers of harm across operators. It gives a platform from Kindred the ability to see if somebody from another platform has come into trouble, has come into problems. But how we get there is a really critical and quite a challenging route. Now, in the UK, GamStop has been chosen as the kind of technology operator to provide us with the pilot. That's going to launch in January with sort of 3 or 4 operators. And it's gone through quite a stringent process with the Information Commissioner's Office to understand the proportionality of the use of data, to try and understand if there's challenges and the opportunities actually that the system provides. But I think it's good to just get straight stuck into the conversation, because there's lots to unpick about a single customer view, from individual privacy rights, how it works in practice, the technicalities about it, and we're going to discuss this all with the esteemed panel. So I'm going to come to you, Peter Paul, first, because this is quite a big conversation now across several markets. As I've explained, the UK seems to be the most advanced. Do you think there's sort of a need for a system like this, and what's sort of your sense of operators' current ability to kind of detect people who come into problems? What's What's your kind of overall sense of this at the moment?
Yeah, so it's very timely, I would say, if you look at it from a Dutch perspective, because in the Netherlands the market has only been recently legalized and opened. On October 1st, we celebrated the first year of open market. But already during the first year, you see the pressure on the gambling industry mounting, that there needs to be more regulation in place, more policy made to protect consumers against problem gambling. One of the calls from politicians and also from society has been to do something around the issue of limits. The current system in the Netherlands is that you have to give your consumer the possibility to set his or her own limits in time and also in the amounts that the consumer can play. But it turned out that the operators did this, so they were complying to the law. But at the same time, you could, as a player, set a limit of 10,000 euros during 24 hours per day, which, of course, is self-defeating. I would say it's a limitless limit. The ministry has to attack this issue head-on, investigated into ways to counter this and to set a system that does work, but came to the conclusion that the overarching player limit, which was called for in politics, is not possible because of various reasons, because it's very complicated, but also because of privacy concerns. And I think the single customer view could be another way of arriving at the same goal.
And Martin, I wanted to build on something Peter Paul just mentioned around some of those concerns around the privacy, for example. What's your sense of the kind of overarching challenges that operators might face from a single customer view perspective, and if there's any opportunities there to overcome those? And what's your sense from an EGPA perspective?
It's a very tricky question, because I think part of it is driven by the idea that we want to control problem gambling and people that have problem gambling behavior. But part of it is also driven by the idea that people should not lose too much money to gambling. So that these are different ideas behind it. Makes a difference. And like the panel discussion this morning said, there are serious privacy considerations to take into account. I think in theory you can do it on an anonymous basis, but it would be a challenge to do, not too difficult to do, but it would be a challenge to do. And I don't think that what was said this morning, that it's 100% true to say because the company wants to help you, therefore GDPR doesn't apply. I think that was a too broad remark. I think it does make a difference, and how you do it as well. So these are, I think, the main concerns in terms of privacy considerations. If I can just make one more remark around it. Yeah. Because single customer view, I think, is part of a broader discussion across Europe about spending limits, players' limits. You have affordability checks. You have generic limits on how much people can deposit per week, per month. And I think this fits into that discussion as well. So the single customer view, I think we should not only see in isolation, but it should be part of this bigger discussion that is held in many jurisdictions now about whether or not you should limit people's playing in terms of money spent and how you should do it. I think that should be part of the discussion as well, although today it will be about single customer view.
Yeah, and Rasmus, let's pick up on the technology point. Yes. In particular. What's your feeling in terms of the need for this kind of far-reaching technology and the kind of way that you've seen operators using technology to detect this sort of harm? And do you want to just give us a bit of insight from your perspective on that?
Yes, of course. The way I see it is that I would start asking a question. Would you ever dream about taking a drive in your car without any kind of safety systems? So you have seatbelt, you have ABS brakes, you have lane keeping assistant and whatever, airbag. In many operator setups, actually there is very few or no safety systems in place. So of course technology can help enhancing this in general, and I also think that potentially single customer view can be such a tool, but there's definitely something to enhance, maybe in parallel or even before we discuss the single customer view from a technological perspective, because you do at Kindred quite sophisticated detection and monitoring. As I understand it, we are a provider of similar solutions, taking both the monetary and the behavioral parts into consideration. But I think there's also a need for a kind of uniform approach, standardization, maybe even certification on how you do develop these solutions, because that is the full foundation, the way I see it, for enhancing into a single customer view, which solves the very important problem of gambling throughout different operators. We can detect and monitor the gambling behavior with each operator, but of course the single customer view very much comes with the challenge of sharing the proper data first and foremost, and then also how to integrate the feedback from this centralized solution.
Yeah, and just to pick up on something else, Peter Paul, I think, because it's always useful to understand in sort of these kind of honest conversations, I guess, what the views are of operators that you're sensing in terms of the way in which this conversation is developing, in terms of the need to be able to have a clearer picture of what customers are doing right across the market. Give us a sort of bit of an under the bonnet insight into kind of where the kind of conversations are at the moment on this.
So overall, the members of NOGA want to prevent problem gambling from happening. I mean, it's almost too obvious to state, but I'm stating it anyway. And let's say that the past year has not really helped in having a lot of confidence to have everyone at the same page, where we base any policy changes or new policy on data instead of on fear and assumptions. And that is something that is happening too much in the Netherlands at current. I mean, we're looking at an advertising ban based on irritation, assumption and fear rather than on data. The same might happen in terms of the limit setting. So the membership of NOGA is very much in favor of showing that the industry has a moral and is able to lead and take initiatives like this and run with and go with it. Because I'm convinced that if we can show society, politicians, policymakers, that we are capable of doing what is best for the consumer, which is to come up with an effective system that prevents problem gambling from developing as much as possible, then I think we will eventually earn trust, and so that's also a bit of a wish.
Rasmus, just to come back to you on something you mentioned about the way in which behavioural harm and financial indicators, because there's quite a bit of disparity between the two, right? There's a lot of conversation about agreeing on markers of harm behaviourally. There's kind of a discussion, often single customer view, and the conversation around seeing customers blends between financial deposit limits, setting limits, and the behavioural markers of harm. What's your kind of experience and sense on those behavioural markers of harm and how we kind of talk about those broadly to agree on and kind of understand that we should be looking for in any kind of system that looks like a single customer view?
Yes, from my perspective, very often behavioral parts are not even taken into consideration. That also actually, when we refer to UK, is very much the early on the situation in terms of the markers of harm, because what we think is important from MIndway AI side is that problematic gambling behavior or at-risk behavior is an individual matter on each and every customer, behind each and every customer ID. So that's we have built an approach where we are able to detect on a very large customer databases both the behavioral parts and the monetary parts. With our virtual psychologist approach.
And Martin, thinking about the way in which the industry looks at those markers of harm. I mean, in the UK, the current proposal is for self-excluded and operator-excluded, plus a yet-to-be-agreed form of kind of very high-risk customers to be included in that single customer view approach. What's your sense on kind of coming to an agreement on what those identifiers and markers of harm and risk level is? What's your sense on that one?
I think the UK is a bit of an outlier in terms of the self-exclusion, because in most European jurisdictions there is a self-exclusion register already, so a single customer review would not add anything to it. For those people that are, let's say, if the objective is with a single customer review to make sure that people are at risk or likely to come at risk or actually problem gambling behavior, if you want to have a single customer view about those players to keep and exchange information one way or the other to make sure that they don't come into trouble, I think you need to look at proper markers of harm that are agreed on an academic and scientific basis. I think there's room to do that. It needs work, but I think there's a lot of thinking and work being done already. There's a lot of information about. And that would be an ambitious goal, but I think that's something that we would really want to achieve. Some sort of a European standard on markers of harm, irrespective of the single customer review, but it would help a single customer review as well. And a single customer review, in my opinion, could be a solution to make sure that people that are in this high risk category being looked after better than they are now.
And Peter Paul, there's often in the debate and with regulators and with governments a focus on, the focus on behaviour and risk is important, but there is quite often, as you've mentioned, a focus on financial thresholds. This isn't, there isn't the correct answer here right now, but a focus on being able to strike the right balance between how we look at a customer's behavioural profile and then looking at their kind of financial picture. And is there kind of the right balance to be struck there? And what's your sense on kind of how we get there in terms of merging those two quite important categories when it comes to looking at risk?
Yeah, so it's really hard to put an amount to risk overall, because risk means something else to me than it does to you and everyone in the audience here. So, and you don't want to be arbitrary, because then these kind of limits might, work against the goals that you set out to achieve. So this is something that we have to really think through, and again, act on the data that we have from the market as it has been performing so far. So luckily in the Netherlands we have a central database requirement, which basically pumps all the information that the players create into a system that can be used for research. So I would really, stress the need to base any further regulation on this point on the data and the study. It will never work alone, so it has to work together with all the other measures. So that it's a bit of a oxymoron, I think, but there's no silver bullet in responsible gambling, but it can play an important part.
And Rasmus, I wonder if you have any insight to share from the work you do around, analysing the behaviour of customers and looking at, where you see those behavioural triggers or where there's the financial triggers. Do you want to kind of give us a bit more of an insight on what you see? And I know that every customer's, completely individual, but do you kind of spot anything that could be helpful in this development of single customer view?
Well, from this discussion, when Martin was saying just before, I was kind of thinking that of course we have to. I fully agree on markers of harm based on science, and occasionally also update them due to new research as well. We accommodate that a lot when we develop our solution. But it also comes with a uniformed and standardized definition of actually who should be included. Because I would say that even though self-exclusion is a very important tool that we have to maintain in the RG toolbox, it is simply insufficient in terms of detecting and monitoring the risk, because, for instance, only 20% of self-perceived problem gamblers have used self-exclusion, research have shown. And that's why actually we have built our AI algorithm on this combination of AI and human RG psychologist experts, which I refer to as a virtual psychologist, to cope with this challenge, because we simply need to try to, as good as we can, to paint the full picture of the individual customer profile, and then add the complexity of large customer databases on top of multiple jurisdictional operators that we have to accommodate, both here and in UK and wherever. And that is definitely an opportunity to enhance the player protection I referred to as these safety systems as from before.
And Martin, you give us the benefit of being the European, multi-country viewpoint on this. I'm not going to give you a test of each market and where they are on this conversation, but the UK is in one place, the Netherlands obviously is in another. What's your sense on the direction of travel on this conversation, kind of broadly across Europe? Yeah,
but it's also why I made a remark earlier that we need to see it also in the background of the other measures that are there with the same idea, not the same idea, but with the idea to influence player limits. If you take Belgium for an example, there's the idea was there would be a cross-operator limit, I think if I'm not mistaken, of 600 or 800 euros per month in terms of deposit limit, but that didn't work out. And now I think there is, if I'm not mistaken, a 500 euro deposit limit per operator. So there you see the interaction between the idea of a single customer view that didn't work, or it wasn't really put into place, and now you have a horizontal per operator loss deposit limit. I know from one regulator that likes the single customer view a lot, but I said, we're not going to take responsibility for this system because it is way too risky, complicated, time intensive. And so there's lots of aspects there in these discussions that are ongoing. I think it is in essence, it's something that people think is a good idea. There's doubts about, the privacy aspects. But if you look at the finer detail how to do it, I think it very much depends on the jurisdiction where you're at. And I think that's something to be aware of. As you said, UK idea is a good idea, but self-exclusion registers already exist, so you need to adapt it to another jurisdiction. Yeah. But one thing is for sure, there's a whole idea of player limits, is the discussion, including single customer views, taking place in a lot of jurisdictions across Europe.
I think one of the points you make, and we'll build on it now, I think, is around that assessment and taking a step back to look at what's already been put in place to understand if that's making a difference. So, in the UK, for example, just a few years ago, we banned credit card use for betting. Now, we haven't really stopped and taken a moment to understand whether that's, it's pretty clear probably that it will have reduced harmful gambling, but we haven't taken a step back to sort of assess that. Now, Peter Paul, I wonder if you can start, as we're here in Amsterdam, which is obviously in the Netherlands, which is a newly regulated market. Often sort of people reflect that, when we do that process of new regulation, we need to understand by reviewing and assessing the effectiveness of it. What's your sense on, firstly, that process of how good we are often at looking at that? And then secondly, how do we make sure that this debate about single customer view is focused on sort of evidence and facts and data and giving us those points to review efficacy of the proposals?
Yeah, I already said something about it, where basically we got the car going, and whilst we're driving, we're taking off one wheel and putting another wheel on whilst the car is driving, without actually looking how well or bad the car is driving, which is something that can lead to unexpected and unpleasant surprises. And that's something that we remain concerned about. But on the other hand, we are working with the ministry and with the KSA, which is the regulator in the Netherlands, and the other stakeholders in the field to ensure that we deliver any information on how things are going currently. So we are sharing, within what is possible, of course, information about the current system of limit setting, where that is not delivering the results that we think are needed. And we invest also as a trade body into an annual research that is a returning research that can actually show you trend lines as well. So we have like 5 topics that we measure and that we ask the Dutch public about. And after a few years, you can actually see if things are going in the right direction or not, and then act upon that data, which is the way we think policy should be made.
And Rasmus, obviously, the artificial intelligence, learning is built into that process. What's your sense on how we kind of take some lessons from maybe the way in which that's constructed into this debate in terms of making sure we build in those review points and assess effectiveness of the different regulations we have? And I wonder if you have any kind of reflections on that process when it comes to this debate.
Well, yeah, definitely. First and foremost, again, I agree, Martin, that sorry, but this single customer view definitely comes with some technical challenge in terms of developing it, maintaining it as well, and likely not taking upon the risk of all regulators. So I agree with that. But yes, what we have, when we talk about, and when I say maybe standardization, maybe even certification, we actually have taken some steps in that regard, because first and foremost, we think we come from the scientific world as a company, and we think it's important that we open our books to industry peers in terms of what we do. So actually, we took the initiative to get our software tested and validated by GLI. The first, and so far to our understanding, also only RD solution provider testing an RD solution. And we also definitely think that anybody who uses our software, our AI software, should understand how it's working. So we speak a lot about explainable AI in terms of this should not be a black box type of solution like we hear from other algorithmic platforms or whatever. There was also some speak about that earlier today. So definitely we think that it's important that we have standardized and overall headlines on directions on how we develop these solutions, no matter if we are software provider, operators themselves, or whoever wants to develop these type of solutions. Sorry.
Well, our panel have had their say, and as Anouschka mentioned, it's now over to the tables to have their say. I don't know if behind me we're going to put the dilemma up, but you'll have an A3 piece of paper on your table to discuss this. And the dilemma is, how do we strike the correct balance between consumer protection and financial and behavioural markers of harm? And how is that applied to a single customer view solution? It is. Look at that. So you've got some time now to do that until around 10 to 3. It's a good opportunity to have those conversations, and then at the end of that process we'll come around and if you've got something really, you reckon you've nailed it and you've got the solution, then hold the flag up as high as you can, and we'll come back to you. But look, thank you to the panel. It's been hard for me to resist going full Britney Spears with this microphone on, as to the rest of the moderators, but it's been really good. And now over to you guys to have your conversations. 25 minutes for the table. There you go. So over to you guys.
Okay, 5 minutes to go. 5 more minutes. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, so let's see what you have discussed at your tables. Who wants to share something to the broader public? Then just raise your flag so that we can learn from each other. An open and honest conversation. So come on, who is going to raise the flag? No one? Yes, great, great, great. Okay, I will come directly to you. Well, very nice table, also with women, so that's also nice to see. Yeah, so tell us.
Yeah, we're all for it.
Maybe you can stand up a little bit, and then we can see you. It is, yeah.
Hello.
All right, so I think following what the panel was saying as well, the main thing for us was that there is a central database and that it's one set of rules. There has to be industry standards because every operator that would potentially be part of this would need to do it the same way. It's the only way we see that it could work out. And also, of course, there will be different ways of setting something like that up. Take Sweden as an example. You have the central registry. Every legal operator is tapping into that. So you set one limit through there, and then you can't go above that if you want to. Well, the operator can't take more money than that if you want to keep your license, and that works quite well.
So setting up a central database would be a recommendation?
Oh, definitely. There has to be one set of rules, because otherwise you'll have some more or less serious operators that will bend it to their way, make sure that, okay, this works for us. Because otherwise you'll get one player bumping around.
Yes.
Betsson might say, we're going to deal with this guy. Let's have Unibet deal with that one. And then you just pass them on, the tricky ones, and you just take the easy way out. But
so they can very easily jump to another, maybe unlicensed company.
Yeah. So if the industry would band together, or the regulator does it, but it has to be one way. It can't be separate. It has to be standardized.
Okay, great. So standardization, one central database. Well, I know that table 15 also came up with something. So can I give one of you the floor? Well, Tom, we already heard Tom. So maybe, what did you discuss on this table?
So basically, we discussed the online versus offline issue, and we also spoke about the importance that the addict, the person who requests a self-exclusion, gets to sign at a preliminary stage that his details, if he tries to hop to a different gambling company, he signs that he will be notified that the other company that he will hop on will be reviewing that information. So,
okay, so the customer has to sign something beforehand?
Yes, that's one solution, sort of speak.
And also the dilemma online versus offline?
Yes. I will let my...
Yeah, so Tom, can you just elaborate a little bit on that? You still have your mic.
Have I? Oh, yeah. No, so one of the things that this, and actually it was a couple of tables we talked about, was obviously the single customer view solution is focusing online, right? So we have an issue where, and it was raised on this table particularly, around, that only gives us a picture of people online. So some of the guys on this table were talking about the ability to then be able to go to a land-based casino, walk through the door, and not come up on any register. And so how do we kind of make sure that any solution tackles both those things?
And was there a kind of solution on this table? How to tackle that problem?
Well, I think in Malta, I don't know if you want to kind of run through how it works from the land-based perspective. I don't know if you want to.
Yes, in Malta, if a problematic gambler needs to self-exclude, he needs to contact our main regulator, the Malta Gaming Authority, or else the Responsible Gaming Foundation, which falls under the umbrella of the main regulator, which is the Malta Gaming Authority again, contacts us by our free phone, books an appointment, and comes to our premises in full confidentiality, and together with our agents, fill in the famous self-exclusion form. And those details, together with his identity card number, are included in the authorities' central database.
Okay, so it sounds that it's good organized in Malta.
Yes. Vis-a-vis land-based, it is organized. We are still lacking in the online sphere, but we are getting there.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Yes?
I think that it's also good if we can look at other industries. I don't know how it's in other countries, but at least in Romania, the telecom operators are sharing among themselves with a third-party database all the bad customers. So, for instance, if you want to go to Vodafone to get a new subscription and you are blocked by Orange because of a bad behavior in the past, you cannot get the subscription unless you clean up with Orange.
So that's
So
also,
they found a way to, because the customer doesn't know.
yeah. And to exchange
They found
the
to exchange information by following all the GDPR rules
Okay.
and the technicalities.
Great.
So could be
also
an
learned from
inspiration.
other industries like the telecom industry.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, maybe some response from this corner. Yes, great.
Yes, hello. We have a moral question we could not answer ourselves.
Okay.
Because a central view, a central database, has privacy implications. And who is going to decide what outweighs what? The privacy of the many versus the safety of the few. So is the government again deciding on us that we should suffer or give this on our privacy?
So it has to be, does it, exactly. So are you looking for an authority or?
I don't know who will has to decide on that and if we can get out of it. And if we cannot answer that question, will be single customer view, will it be a realistic path to go on?
Yes. Well, maybe, I don't know, Tom, can you maybe answer that question? So who is going to be the authority or who is going to decide actually?
Yeah, so in the UK, for example, the pilot is GamStop. So they're a third party that hold the information, particularly around self-excluded customers. But that is a challenge, right? So we talked on this table about should it be the regulator that ultimately holds the register? Should it be the operators themselves through another third party system? It's really tricky. And the UK pilot, which kicks off in January, will give us some learnings from that process, and that's why I think one of the things we talked about in the panel was about that opportunity to reflect and to assess the effectiveness of it, because we need to understand challenges like that in terms of who holds the data and who kind of the operators can take the information from. So it's a really good question. It's a tricky one to answer, and it's one of many that show why single customer view is difficult and a challenge to get over.
And it's also about working together then with different stakeholders, getting to know each other, trust each other.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Oh, there's a flag. You know the procedure. You understand the procedure. Great. May I ask you to just stand up, or are you more comfortable by reading it?
No.
Okay, great.
So I'm Pontus Lindvall. I'm the CEO of Betsson, which is a pan-European and almost global operator. And we started off by discussing at this table here what we want to achieve really, and we concluded that it's safer gambling. And we believe that maybe we should work a little bit more on the definition of that, like including certain measurables like affordability and things like that. And then to this dilemma, we believe that players are not very fond of sharing much personal information in general, so that's an obstacle, of course. And
why is that, actually?
I think that's in the human nature. You don't want to share your privacy, how much you spend on gambling, drinking, and whatever.
And is it also because of the stigma? Is there still a stigma on gambling?
Especially more so in the case of gambling, I believe so.
Okay.
And then on the single customer view, it's very hard to achieve that. We have a central exclusion database in Sweden where all the licensed operators are connected, and that works pretty good, and I think that's a good idea. But then again, there are the operators outside of the regulation, and what we see now is a outflux of players to the unregulated sites, and it's very hard to stop that. And these players who leave the regulated environment are the people that really needs to stay inside the regulated environment and be with the regulated players. So that's a problematic situation as well.
Yes, but all the license in the license industry, they are willing to share data.
We don't really share data. It's just a central exclusion database. So we don't share, we don't have the single view of the player, unfortunately, which means that from Betsson we can't see how players are playing with Kindred or Svenska Spel. But if they exclude that Kindred, they are excluded with us as well. So that's how it works. But the problematic part of that is that when they have excluded and then change their mind a month later, then they go outside of the regulation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we concluded that it's a very hard question, and there needs to be a balance in what kind of measures you take, because we also have to remember that this is something which is enjoyable and fun for the vast majority of the customers, and we can't put in too much restrictions that harm for everybody and kind of destroys the industry.
Yes.
So
how to take care of the minority and not actually harming the majority?
And we couldn't solve that last question.
No, well, I mean, if you had, it would be wonderful, of course, in 25 minutes. So you still have some time when you go back to the office tomorrow, of course, to solve this problem. But thank you very much for sharing so far on this topic. We'll have a short coffee break now for 15 minutes. And we hope to see you all back, of course, for our second table round at 3:05. Great, yes. See you later.
Try to fix it. I wish that I could hate